Hi, thanks very much for asking me to speak. I'm Canvas Boomler. I'm a GP in Tower Hamlets since 1982, and I'm also the treasurer of Tower Hamlets Stand Up to Racism. And I think that there are important links between our campaign here about our air in Tower Hamlets and the anti-racist movement that I want to draw out. But I'll start off by talking about the air. Now, I'm mainly now an academic GP at Queen Mary, and I've been involved in linking data from your GP practices in Tower Hamlets with the air pollution stuff that is collected on our streets, mainly by King's College University. And we know from a lot of that data and others that Tower Hamlets is near the bottom of air quality in London. In fact, it's fifth from the bottom of any London borough. And we've also known for about 5 years now that this causes children in Tower Hamlets to grow up with less lung capacity than the national average. We're involved in the moment in another study which is going to be comparing Tower Hamlets kids with those in Luton, and I'll say perhaps a bit more about that later. But on average, Tower Hamlets kids have got 5% less lung capacity than the national average, and the range goes up to 12 or 14% of the more severely affected kids, and that's lung capacity that never grows back. And it was quite a surprise to us, because when we started, and in fact I'm not the main researcher in this, I help extract some of the GP data that goes to the main researchers. But when we started this a while back, it was when they were introducing the low emission zone in London. And what we were originally looking at was whether kids with asthma in Tower Hamlets were going to do better in their SATs exams at school, because we expected that the low emission zone in London would actually improve air quality, that kids with asthma would get less asthma attacks and therefore less time off school, and we thought that we might be able to demonstrate a link to their exam results. And to our great surprise, the air quality didn't improve at all as a result of Ken Livingstone's low emission zone. And the main reason for that was that we were deceived by the car industry. And we were deceived because at the same time as all these new standards were being put in London, the car industry encouraged us all to be buying diesel cars, and we know that the particulates, although the carbon dioxide was less with diesels than with petrol, the particulates and the nitrogen dioxide went up, and as a consequence the air quality actually got worse, and so we weren't able to demonstrate any improvement in the kids. And that was why people went on to do more studies about lungs, which is what I was just telling you about a little bit earlier on. And so that deception by the car industry has been an awful thing, and central government has failed to act decisively to keep our children safe. And this goes on to affect things later on in life, because if you grow up with damaged lungs, then your heart ages more, and as a consequence of that, you're more prone to heart disease and so on. And in fact, during this COVID epidemic, we've seen that the people who are most affected by that, in part, are those that are, more subject to air pollution and so on. So all of these things really interrelate. But as with many bad things in life, the effect of all of this isn't spread evenly throughout our community. We know that air pollution in Tower Hamlets is worse along main roads, and I expect most of you here have seen the maps of Tower Hamlets which show all that. And we've got 11 of our secondary schools and 37 of our primary schools which exceed already the statutory limits on air pollution. And the poorest people, that's 40% of our borough's population, live along the main roads, where air pollution is worse and the air is not safe to breathe. But I wanted to just say a little bit, because my family, part of my family, come from India, and this is an international problem. Because just as the poorest people in the borough are affected by this the most, that's also true across the world in general. And we're seeing with the climate catastrophe an increase in forest fires, and 77% of all countries are affected. And we hear about that in the news, you know, when there are forest fires and stuff in rich countries like Australia, and California is in the news recently. But the countries that are actually worst affected are India and China, and in Delhi, where some of my family still live. About 80% of children's lungs are damaged by this effect, because India, in that part, it acts as a sort of dust bowl, and all the pollution collects around Delhi and so on. So just as it's in this borough, it's the poorest people that are affected most. In the world as a whole, it's also climate catastrophe, and air pollution doesn't affect people equally. So part of the reason I'm here from Tower Hamlets Stand Up to Racism is because in this borough, it's obviously black and Asian, people of black and Asian minorities that are part of the poorest and therefore live closest to main roads and so on. So there's a natural link between the two campaigns of Stand Up to Racism and XR and so on. We are campaigns that naturally work together and have to work together. And I think, therefore, it's quite significant that after the killing of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, it's quite significant, really, that slogan, "I can't breathe,"